by accident.
By accident. Everything's done on purpose here. This is scientific. We're at a university. So what we're talking about are global cities, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff on the board about where cities are going in the future, where they were in the past. The notion of global cities is one been around, what, 10 years?
Yes, even more than that. It was first there in 1980s, then 1990s, but it's popularized in the 21st century.
But Taylor, was he the first one to do this?
Saskin,
and Taylor and Peter Hall, Manuel Castells,
yeah,
all of them in contribution.
John Friedman.
Of course, we shouldn't forget about John Friedman. Why? Cities have always been global. They've always been located someplace on the global.
Yeah.
What's different in the concept of global cities, and why should we even care?
If we want to differentiate between global cities and the conventional cities, I think global cities are coined to capture the particularity of the urban form in contemporary globalization.
Oh, no, those are big words.
Yeah.
Particularly the urban form. Well, the urban form, has it changed because of cities?
Urban functions, because cities are playing more and more important role in contemporary global connection, global exchange of products.
Well, cities always have, haven't
Yeah.
they? But the national government has been very important. They could say, we won't let this product in, or you can't go here. But cities now are the locus of international trade, not the nation state.
Yes, but one argument from the global cities that the interaction between cities tended to be challenging or even superseding the traditional international exchange between nation states. Nation states are defined by the national boards. They are artificial, but cities have some kind of like organic evolvement of its role and functions.
All right, so London and New York
Yeah,
can communicate with one another,
exactly.
and the governments, England and the United States, can communicate with one another.
Yep.
Are you saying in the hierarchy thing, London and New York may have more to do with one another than the nations?
No, I'm not saying that, because nations still are important actors in the international relationships. That's where the word international is from, international. But now the increasing connectivity between cities add a new layer of relationship, and that is based on the urban nodes around the cities. Just to give you one example, the connection between London and New York is very likely to be more intense or more important than the connection between London and another smaller city that is based within UK.
All right, so New York has greater ties to London than, say, London has with Edinburgh.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, I think that helps us define these things, because it is clear to me now that here in Sydney, we may have better relations with San Francisco than we do with Melbourne.
Yeah, exactly.
And more transactions going back and forth.
Yeah, and a certain part in the city of Sydney that might have more daily business relationship with Singapore than with like even Canberra or Perth. Even
within Sydney.
Exactly, within the Sydney region.
And that wasn't the case in the past, because you always had to go through the national government to even communicate.
Yep.
When I worked in Africa in the 1970s,
Yep.
to make a phone call, I had to schedule it.
Yep.
And I'd call, the call would be routed to London,
Yep.
and then from London to Los Angeles.
Yep.
I could not make a telephone call directly. So the nation state was in the way.
Yeah. So another thing is that, look, and so people, in particular, those creative people, they're highly mobile between global cities rather than between nations. Just to give you one example, and some young people in Australia who are based in Sydney and they choose to work in Shanghai, to what extent they are there because it's Shanghai, not necessarily because it's China. Because so I think the argument is true, is that the cities are the nodes and the new actors of the international, or we use the word global, connection and movement.
So what does this mean? Does this mean that a smaller town, let's say even 200,000 or 300,000, that's 150 kilometers away from a major city, doesn't count anymore?
They do count, and because there are different layers of the relationships, and the global cities, the relationship between global cities, add a new layer. That is something new in the contemporary globalization. It doesn't mean that the conventional relationships are not important anymore. For example, the relationship between nation states are still important, and the small towns and small areas are still important. But there is the hierarchical structure of those different relationships. And the central argument from the global city thesis is that more increasingly the global relationships happen between cities.
Right, so you're not just saying cities, you're saying big cities.
Big cities.
And metropolitan regions.
Yeah.
And so if I'm in one of the smaller places, I'm probably a subsidiary to a larger node.
Yep.
And my telecommunications, like I mentioned in the past, might pass through that node to get to the bigger place in another place, and then go to another small place.
Yep. Yeah.
But increasingly, I would imagine a medium-sized town like Geelong might have a very great relationship with Hanoi, bypassing the nation state, where there's some product that Hanoi makes that people like amass for their yachts. They're made in Hanoi for yachts in Melbourne, and the people in Melbourne then sell them around the world to other people because Hanoi people don't have the connections to make those sales.
So those relationship occurs between cities or city regions and directly, and
not through the nation state.
Not necessarily through the nation states, and the boundaries of nation states are man-made. Artificial.
Well, so are the boundaries of cities.
Exactly, but cities also evolve through, kind of like a more organic way. Even though we do have administrative structure, for example, Canberra and New South Wales, there is a boundary, but factually, Canberra is more interacting with the surrounding regions in New South Wales, blurring the barrier of the administrative boundary that it was man-made.
Well, okay. Now, there are global cities in almost every nation, and this hierarchy of cities means almost that if you're not in London, Tokyo, Berlin, etc., you're not going to get one of the top jobs. The top jobs are going to be in those places, are they not?
Yes and no, because those cities are atop the global city hierarchy, largely because of the size. They do have the critical mass. But smart jobs and good jobs are there, and they might have more good jobs. It doesn't mean that smaller places do not have good jobs. There are some niche market, and for example, Silicon Valley is not big, but the jobs there are very good, and the impact is global. So I think sizes still matters, but I think apart from sizes, and I think apart from the quantity side of the sizes, I think the quality and the nature of the jobs are still important, in particular in today's world that is linked through this kind of like new economy and digital technology.
All right, there's just a couple things here. One of them is that if I'm in a city, a moderate-sized city that's not a global city, and I want to play in a bigger world. Can technology really help me leap over that so I'm a big figure in art or architecture without leaving my hometown, or do I still have to transit that global city to get some kind of credentialing in order to be important?
There is a matter of market accessibility. In order to access market, of course, and the global cities are the primary locations, especially when you work in the producer services. If you work for financial, insurance, banking, and management consultancy, even architecture, you want some global image to outreach this market. If you are isolated physically in a kind of like remote location, you might be a great architect, a designer, but you cannot access the market. So I think there must be a way to expose you to the global market. Of course, global cities should be the primary locations.
Well, these global cities, Chicago's, New York's, and so forth, are growing in the United States and in Australia, but they're shrinking cities as well. Some medium-sized cities are shrinking in the United States to the point that, like a Cleveland and so on, that very difficult for them. The smallest towns in Australia are almost disappearing.
Yep.
The pull of urban technologies is not allowing these places to compete anymore.
I think Detroit is a good case, and that's because the economic base, the industrial base, is losing its weight that it used to have decades ago, and those cities, they used to be like reliant on heavy industry, manufacturing, and for some cities, for example, in China or elsewhere, the local economy used to be reliant on the mining or the excavation from the resources. And when the economy is not reliant on those primary resource manufacturing anymore, of course, the cities will be declining and the losing population, the shrinking. So there should be a revitalization of the local economy. I think Chicago could be a good case because it transformed its economy from the industrial to post-industrial to become a global city and to become a hub of the producer services.
So what are the keys to that?
The key to that is it managed to transform its industrial base successfully from industrial economy to
knowledge Pittsburgh and Chicago, but we have Wollongong here.
Yeah.
It's done fairly well. Newcastle's done even better in that transformation. What are the keys to those places and their success that you would suggest other cities ought to emulate?
I think locally Wollongong, Newcastle could be interesting cases to show how the industrial centers could be transformed to capture the opportunities from the knowledge economy and having the local university as kind of like innovative hub to drive the local innovative capacity. The University of Wollongong plays an interesting role in transforming the local economic base, and so.
Well, that's true in Newcastle as
well. Exactly.
So what you're saying is a knowledge institution.
Yep.
Is critical to this.
Of course.
So the knowledge institution, in both those cases, they have created some sort of nodes around them. So people who want to stay there can create new businesses, enterprises, and the like.
Yep.
And the third thing they have is advanced communication systems.
Yeah, sure. And they are even though they're within they're close to the Greater Sydney region, but they're not within the urban fringe. And I think the technology, the communication plays some role. And they are not within the Sydney region, but they're fairly close. And so there are also some kind of like spillover effects from the major metropolitan centers.
Okay, now Richard, last question. Where are we going with all this? You know, we've had the evolution of terminology, industrial city, global cities. Now we're talking about innovation cities. What's next?
What's next? The next cities, I think.
Or will they be cities? Will they be something else? Will they be nodes? Well, where are we going with the spatial economy?
I think with the spatial economy, with the new technology and the information technology, the knowledge economy, and with the new imperative of environmental sustainability, I think we need to broaden our conceptualization of what makes a city or what makes a region. It may not be defined by the density of built environment or by the density of living population. It might be increasingly defined by what kind of role it plays in the kind of like integrated regional or global system that is not only defined by the conventional measures such as density, but also by the role, the nature of its functions in the new system.
Well, I've got a couple of examples of that. Ashland, Oregon, which is Shakespeare capital, can play that in a global way. There are places in Utah where they do computers and things like that. There are other places in the United States and in England that have taken higher education to new heights by specializing either in African education or new farm technologies and all. And of course, what they've done in telecommunications in India is fascinating.
They have a
they haven't had to be big, but they have a specialization.
Specialized role to fit into the bigger structure of systems.
So there's specializations, connectivity, that's really important, particularly telecommunications connected. But there is some sort of a density here, or agglomeration of people doing that kind of thing and gain a brand or national or international reputation. And then that's backed up by some form of education, tertiary education, and some sort of research
and development institutions.
And that can happen in a small place. It doesn't need to be a large place.
Now, you don't have to be very large to be globally important or regionally important. And critical, as I said, size still matters, but apart from that and the nature of the activity and the speciality, the specialized capacity is also very important.
Well, will be more important if we figure out a way to make things like this a world show and have the world watch us and learn more about where cities are going.
Thank you, Richard. Very small device.
Yes.
Pleasure.